Let's move on to Bitcoin, shall we? That's a virtual
Bitcoin has now almost overtaken all-time high.
I would love to introduce our keynote speaker, Steve Beauregard. Steve is a serial entrepreneur who has been involved in the Bitcoin space now for several years. He's the CEO and founder of GoCoin, a merchant acquirer payment processor. You can see GoCoin on your tags here. He's been involved in many projects, including projects related to DirecTV, BlackBerry, and GoCoin was recently listed as Silicon Beach's hottest startup in March of 2014. Steve is going to talk a little bit more about how you can accept payments in Bitcoin and why Bitcoin truly does benefit businesses around the world. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Steve Beauregard, co-founder and CEO of GoCoin.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Elizabeth and I have known each other for 6 months, but she still gets it wrong. It's Beauregard. That's okay. Thank you. I'm Steve Beauregard, founder and CEO of GoCoin. And yesterday I couldn't even pronounce the name of the city we're in, but I'm very excited. Gregor was very gracious to bring us on a nice tour. And yeah, so set myself up here. No, maybe it's better down here. Wow, what a beautiful city. So I'm very, very happy to be here in Ljubljana. I hope I said it right. But welcome to everybody. So I want to start off by thanking our hosts, Gregor and Ron. They've done a tremendous job of pulling everything together for this day. We've been working with them for a while. We signed an agreement with them to help us with business development matters here in the Adriatic region. And they've just been great. A lot of motivation. If anyone's had the pleasure of working with them, they're a great team. So I want to thank them. Also, if anyone has had a chance to use the ATM down in the lobby, I need to do it myself because I need some euro right now. So it's a two-way ATM and be a good opportunity to get that started. So let me start off with a little trivia question because I always like to give a gift away. So who knows what the smallest unit of Bitcoin is called? I think the first one was back there, but it's actually a Dorian because it's too small and can't be verified. So we can send that gift back to the gentleman in the... Okay, great. So I'm going to get into this presentation. Has anybody seen me present before on the operator on-ramp? I didn't think so. You'd be a lot more excited. The credit cards. First of all, there's a good reason that we have a Target here when we have a picture of the credit card. If anyone's familiar with Target in the U.S., where they lost 40 million credit cards that were compromised, and I myself had 2 of my credit cards that had to be replaced. In the last 6 months, I've had 4 different credit cards that had to be replaced because of fraud. These were not systems that were designed to be on the internet. Even in the case of the new technologies where you have the chip cards and you have technologies like EMV, these are still they're not designed for card not present situations. So giving all of your credentials and having somebody with the ability to pull money out of your account goes against the nature of how an online transaction should work. So as an operator, if you're running a website, you've got a lot of pain points. And those pain points start with the credit card fees. You're typically paying 3, sometimes 4%, sometimes even more. And then on top of that, 30 cents on top of that transaction. And that's pretty typical. That's a typical charge for a credit card checkout. And most merchants just accept this. That's the way it is. That's the cost of doing business. Well, it doesn't have to be. And you have other payment methods like prepaid cards. Some websites, since they have trouble taking credit cards, they'll send you to a retail store to go buy a prepaid card. And guess what? You end up paying 10, 20%. The operator gets maybe 80 cents on the dollar in that scenario. So all of these intermediaries all have their hand out. They're all getting a part of that transaction. So how can we disrupt this? So enter digital currencies and the ability to take these as payment online. This is what they were designed for. So Bitcoin obviously is the most circulated. We have other coins that have been branched or forked off of Bitcoin and have put some innovations, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But you have military grade encryption, low transaction fees, all sorts of things that are very, very unique to an online transaction, and that actually make it more advantageous to the merchant. But by doing that, by making it more advantageous to the merchant, you've taken a lot of power away from the consumer. And that causes a problem because now the consumer, they don't have the ability to charge back if there's a problem. So what's developing, if anybody use a service like Uber? Is that something you have here, maybe not? Uber is a ride-sharing service where you can hail a car right from your phone. And somebody who's a driver that is on the same system sees that you need a ride and they come pick you up. It's part of what we're calling the sharing economy. It's an economy. Airbnb is another one of these kinds of services where if you have a spare room in your house, you can put it up for rent for a night. And so what happens is people will start to, as they use these services, they'll rate on the website, how was your stay, how was your ride, and then they start to get this rating. And that's what's really going to start to balance the power out in the next generation. It won't be so much about credit card chargebacks and people that are able to do very fraudulent things with that power that the consumer has had. So going through different payment methods, and I probably should not have just put the GoCoin. That's really something that's intrinsic upon any of the Bitcoin payment methods. But these are all of the advantages you have over the traditional payment methods. Transaction fees are typically high with credit cards, gift cards. Bank transfers are actually the other thing. They're pretty close in terms of lower transaction fees. Another one that's big here is the international fees. Oftentimes when I use my credit card over here from the US, all my credit card, every single time I've used it, it's $1.50 for each charge that I make over here. And that's the privilege I get of using my card. So those fees are all very, very unnecessary, and that's where the banks are getting fat. So my old adage is that pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. So I think we're in a situation now that the hogs are ready for slaughter. I think it's time to disrupt the incumbents who have had an absolute monopoly on the point of sale, both in the retail stores as well as on the online transactions. So what you've seen so far is a presentation I've given probably 6-7 times over the last, call it 4 or 5 months, okay? And what I've realized is I've gone down the path, we're getting merchants, we're convincing them that they should sign up and start to take Bitcoin as a way to get paid. And then it occurred to me, having watched transactions happen, watch what we call there's no nice way to put it, you get very excited about having a baby, and then the day comes and then there's a problem, okay? So, and they call it the dead baby syndrome. So everyone gets very, very excited about the baby, and then you launch, somebody posts up on Reddit, they go, okay, we're live, and there's a bunch of orders that come in from people that are excited about it, and all of a sudden, the transactions just drop off. It's just like right off of a cliff. And the problem is, people that have Bitcoin, by and large, don't want to spend them. I don't want to spend them. So why is that? So I break them down into 3 major categories. The first one's the Bitcoin millionaire. That's the person that started either investing early or bought Bitcoin when it was somewhere sub $50, or they were mining early and they've been accumulating Bitcoin and they don't want to spend it. The second one are the day traders, or gamblers as I call them. They're just purely speculating, and the only transactions they're doing are the transactions that have to do with trading coin. They're not buying products. They're not using it. They're not getting the utility out of it. They're just trying to make a little bit of money on this trade, that trade. They're trading in and out of the altcoins, and they're just all day long trying to make money, just gambling. And then there's the hoarders, people that see this as part of their investment portfolio. I am long on Bitcoin. I'm going to buy this as part of my portfolio, and it's just going to sit over here in cold storage, and I'm not going to touch it for a long time. So why is this? Well, I think part of it's the very nature of Bitcoin is deflationary. It's designed so it's going to go up in value. So do I want to use that in my transaction today if I think it's going to be worth more tomorrow? So it causes a very, very interesting problem. So a lot of it is, what things can we do to stimulate people with Bitcoin to spend them? And I think it's not so much about the people that have it already, because they're already in one of these categories. They've already sort of decided where they are. So the only thing we can do is try to train them to take part of their Bitcoin and use it. Or we can say, hey, you need to be in a habit of every week buying $100 worth of Bitcoin. And that's just what you do. And you use it. And the other stuff that you wanted to store it away. Or maybe it's not Bitcoin, maybe it's one of the altcoins. It might be that an altcoin will come about that is a lot more transactional. Excuse me a second. So what are the use cases? What are the things that will encourage use? So for that, you have to look at a little bit of the history. So we've moved beyond, thankfully, the Silk Roads and some of the early sites. But these are businesses that were successful in establishing a cycle of use. So like it or not, Silk Road, which is the website where you could buy illegal drugs, and people would go and actually buy coins simply for using it in the transaction. So think about that. They're going to go buy coins simply because they want to use it in the transaction. Because they thought it was anonymous. They found out the hard way it wasn't anonymous because they had no trouble tracking them down and put the people behind the site in prison, or at least they're under prosecution. Satoshi Dice, another fine example. People in the early days, a lot of the transactions on Bitcoin were coming through the Satoshi Dice site because people were gambling with them. And then you have a whole host of black market casinos that are doing Bitcoin denominated gambling. And so these use cases, what can we learn from them? What can we learn from them without going to jail? That's really what the question is. So a lemonade stand, maybe that's the answer. Well, actually this is a very shameless way of working my daughter into the slides. So she ran a Bitcoin lemonade stand. Guess how many sales she made? 0. Oh, I'm sorry, she made sales, of course, but people use money. Nobody used Bitcoin to come buy lemonade. So one of the things as an operator you have to think about is your business, in terms of Bitcoin, a lemonade stand. Do I have a lemonade stand? And if you do, don't bother taking Bitcoin. Don't waste your time, don't waste your effort, because you're going to have the same problem where if there's not a compelling reason for somebody to use Bitcoin as a transaction on your site, don't waste your time. Okay? So we don't want lemonade stands. So let's look at some of the merchants out here and figure out what use cases actually are quite good and lend themselves well to Bitcoin today. Well, if you get back to the Silk Road, one of the things people wanted was they wanted privacy. They wanted actually anonymity, but let's just say it was privacy. So we have to come up a level into the things that are maybe a little bit more edgy. Okay, so how about regulated gambling? So that's a market that we're going after quite heavily, because I think the legal regulated gambling is a good use case. It makes sense why people would go buy Bitcoin, because they have trouble getting money into the game. So it's a good use case. Ring Plus is the first telecom that's accepting Bitcoin. This is in the US, that is. And so you can top your phone up and top your minutes up with Bitcoin. So that's a good use case, because you have your wallet on your phone typically, and you get an SMS message, and you can just right from the phone pay that invoice. So it's ease of use. So there's a good use case there. Some of the other ones, domain sales. So we work with Agreed Escrow. Agreed Escrow is one of the companies that if you want to buy a high-priced domain, they stand in the middle of the transaction. They have the domain transferred to you. They hold the money in the middle. Once the other person gets the money, they release the domain. That's a good use case because that's moving money from one asset to another. Somebody has Bitcoin, we'll use it. So we have to find these different types of businesses where it's actually encouraging the use. So my message here is really to stop trying to boil the ocean. It's not a race just to go after the big merchants, because the big merchants aren't necessarily going to do all that well. Somebody asked me last night, how is Dell doing? Well, Dell isn't a merchant that's working with us, but they made a big announcement. Dell Computers now taking Bitcoin as a way to pay for your computers. And I thought about it. Would I buy a Dell computer with my Bitcoin when I can use my credit card? If there's a problem, I can charge it back? Probably not, because that's not necessarily a great use case. I think it's a great deal for the industry. It gives validation, and that's all good. But how many transactions are they actually going to do? So what are the key characteristics? So what's going to repeatedly motivate people to go buy coins simply for the purpose of using it in a transaction? And that's the question I think we really need to get to. So the answers I have, and by the way, if anybody has the answers here, I'd love to hear them, because this is a problem we all have, and I think the only way we get to more mainstream adoption is by solving these problems, finding these ecosystems that will work and that will feed themselves. I mean, the most common one, I'm going to go backwards here, the most common one is mining. Mining makes sense because you have coins, you buy mining hardware, which is the latest and greatest, which produce more coins, which you then use to buy more mining gear, which produces more coins. It's a cycle, and it feeds itself. Okay? Just as we saw in the case of Silk Road. Somebody wants drugs, unfortunately. They use them, then they want more, and it just feeds itself. So they'll keep going and buying the coins simply to use it in the transaction. So that's the kind of thing we need to find. So the other characteristics are privacy, when somebody wants privacy in a transaction. For example, let's say you want to take your girlfriend on a nice trip. You're going to fly to Italy and stay in a nice hotel and have a nice time at the weekend. But your credit card happens to go to your wife. Okay. That's a situation you may want privacy. Like it or not, and that's certainly not something that I would do, because that's a happily married man, but there are some people that would. And you recognize that those are situations that people want privacy. So sites like Cheap Air and sites like Expedia should do quite well in advertising to those markets. But think of this as a means to an end, because these are sort of edge cases, and they're not necessarily the most socially proper, but at the same time, they do feed an ecosystem. And that's really what's going to get us to the end goal, which is really to serve unbanked, the unbanked of the world, and give them an on-ramp to participate online in transactions. So another is where credit card payments or other payment methods are commonly rejected. So think of an operator who, right now they come through the credit card, somebody fat fingers in their billing address, and then bam, their credit card's rejected. Well, shouldn't it pop up and say, have you considered using Bitcoin? Okay, here's where you can get it, here's where you can get a wallet. Bring them right through a path that shows them how they can use another payment method. And oh, by the way, here's a coupon code that you can come back and use that gives you an incentive to go get Bitcoin. So those are the kinds of solutions we need to start putting in place so that it becomes more mainstream adopted. But the places we're going to have to do it are probably going to be a little bit more edgy. Not illegal, just edgy. So here's some of the brands that we're working with. And I think I've got a repeat slide, so there's not much to talk about here. But these are some of the big names in the industry that are accepting Bitcoin today. But if you look around that chart, the situation I'm talking about, there's very few that really have that need to go buy coin just to use it in a transaction. So different ways to get Bitcoin, and I think it's important to think about this as well, because obtaining Bitcoin is difficult. That's part of the problem too. So as you're talking to people, have them think about these different ways they can get it. The traditional way is you go, you download a wallet. You get the wallet either on your phone or on your computer or wherever you get it. Then you go to one of the retail sites, such as Bitstamp, ExpressCoin, Coinbase, one of the places where you can buy it. And then you have Bitcoin. Well, another one people don't often think of is services like GoCoin and BitPay and others have the ability for for professional service providers to accept it as a form of payment. So you can generate an invoice from within the system for legal fees, for professional services, computer programmers. We have every different type of service provider you can imagine. PR people even are taking Bitcoin payments through our platform. And actually, they do some pretty significant numbers based on the fact that they're in the Bitcoin ecosystem and they build through the system in Bitcoin. So that's another good use case. And it's a great way to earn coins. Earn coins, you can do it through mining also, but there's hashing. And then of course the ATMs. So this is a picture I took last night of the machine in the lobby downstairs. So another easy on-ramp. And as these become more and more prolific and out in easy to access, I think that's another great on-ramp for ways to get Bitcoin. So let's say now that you're a online operator and you decide that you do want to take Bitcoin. You don't have a lemonade stand, but you're selling you're selling some goods that you want. So you look at your website and you have a couple decisions you have to make. The first one is, what are you using in terms of your checkout process? And there's some, I ran into some integrator here earlier today. You may want to raise your hand if you do like shopping cart plugin consulting, and then somebody can track you down. So there he is, Alex. And you know, you want to find somebody who can help you make some of these decisions. So how are you going to host your invoice? Are you going to do like a white label integration and make it, you know, very, you know, branded in your own brand? Then you have to decide which coins do you want to take. Is it just Bitcoin, or are there other coins that maybe are more transactional? We see a lot of Litecoin transactions, and Dogecoin is sort of like the tipping coin. That's one that people, if they're spending just a couple bucks, very common that they'll just throw that out. And I don't think the altcoins that are out today are nearly as interesting as the ones that are coming. So we are constantly watching for coins and which ones are coming, what characteristics they have. But there's some really interesting altcoins that are going to be coming out, and we're pretty excited about some. One in particular, which will be tethered actually to the price of the dollar, so it won't have the volatility problem, because every one will be, you know, have backing in a bank of an actual dollar, and then we'll be able to go look at the bank account transparently and see the balance to make sure that that's actually true. So after that, you go through, you set up your merchant account, send in your KYC documents. That's just a requirement of pretty much anyone in the Bitcoin ecosystem now. If you're going to do transactions, we need to see your business licenses. We need to know who the beneficial owners are. And in some cases, they even want, you know, electricity bills and utility bills, things of that nature. So you upload all those details, and then you know, put in the different payment methods you want. If you're going to do banking, then we need routing numbers and wire details, so we know how to, you know, what bank account to send the proceeds to. And then also you can set a split, whether you want your digital currency to be, you know, you want 0% dollars or fiat currency, or whether you want all Bitcoin. And you can slide that scale anywhere in between. So if you want to have 50-50 and have some exposure to the, you know, the volatility, for better or worse, of the coins, you can do that. And then you just test your system, you go live. So a couple of examples of merchants that have done some pretty innovative things. One of the things that we found, this is a site called Bitaban, and this is the product detail page. One of the things that we found is a lot of times consumers will go to the checkout, fill the cart, and then they get to the payment method and say, oh, Bitcoin, what's that? And they click Bitcoin, and it looks as if they're actually just checking the exchange rate that they're going to get. So this merchant did something pretty innovative. Just got a little pointer here. I'll just go with point. So they did a little mouse over that popped up a light box to show the exchange rate currently, so they would know before actually clicking on it. So they wouldn't just click and create an invoice, just simply for the purpose of checking what the rate was. So that's a nice little feature. So those that haven't seen what a transaction looks like, when you do actually click pay, this is what you typically see. You see a big QR code come up, and then you'll see you know, the actual price. This happens to be a Litecoin invoice, and then you'll see the big long public key where you actually transmit the money. So if you're paying from a mobile phone, you would actually just line it up, hold it over the QR code. You would then push your push your payment out to the network, and then it's going to show up as paid on the system. So pretty straightforward. A lot of people worry about the timing of, you know, how long does this actually take, and it's sub 5 seconds now. So we've gotten it down to the point where it's almost instantaneous that we're seeing the payments on the backside. So another feature that we rolled out recently. Let's see if I know how to initiate this. This is an example of topping up an account. So take the scenario of you're an online wallet and you want to use Bitcoin to, you know, take from your Bitcoin and move it into your online wallet. This is all done through SMS.
We created the Merchant Super Site to demonstrate how easily customers can fund prepaid accounts using digital currencies, including Bitcoin and Litecoin. I'll show the funding process as the customer would see it. I'd like to add funds to my account. I can select from some preset payment amounts and choose the type of digital currency I'll be paying with. The last required field is an email or SMS number to receive the payment request. Immediately, I receive a text alert with a payment link via GoCoin on my mobile phone. Clicking the link launches my Bitcoin wallet. I confirm the payment amount from my account to complete the transaction. I'm done. I'm back on the merchant site and ready to roll.
Okay, so the point there, and that's all mocked up. So if you imagine that you're a website, you already have the cell phone number, and you're able to just, okay, so for those that aren't exactly clear on the flow and how the flow works from these transactions, so in the case that we just saw of the mobile payer, they're the customer, they see they're on a merchant website, they have, let's say, $100 they want to top up on their account. The merchant website then calls over to the GoCoin API and says, what is $100 currently in Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, whichever coin they're using. We then send the invoice, step number 3, directly to the customer. And the customer sends the Bitcoin back to us. That's often something people don't understand. We're controlling the address where the coins are received. And from there, we then notify the merchant website that we've received the coins. That's an irreversible, non-chargeback event. So from that point, they can finish their transaction, give the transaction ID to the customer, and complete their transaction. Then the magic happens on the other side, where we go and take that, convert that into fiat currency, wire that down to our bank account, and then ultimately distribute and settle that payment with the merchants. So an example here of shopping cart plugins and how these work. This is I think it's a WooCommerce plugin. It's easy. You can just drop this in. Literally have these up and running inside of 5 minutes. We had one merchant that we actually literally from start to finish within 15 minutes had them up and running and tested with an easy plugin like this. Just to show a quick example of what, as a merchant coming in and seeing the dashboard, the different areas. This is when you want to create a bill. Preferences is where you're going to set things such as where are my payout addresses for the different coins. You also set in preferences things like your payout address for bank accounts, ACH, SEPA, UK faster payments, Gyro down in Southeast Asia, any of the different payment methods. And then there's area for developers if you want to actually fully integrate this and build a white label solution that sits on top. So one such company doing that is called XP Terminal, and they're going to be launching a point of sale register that is sort of replacing the swipe card terminals, but it's going to be fully digital currency enabled with multiple currencies. And they built that as a complete white label solution. There'll be no branding from GoCoin there. It'll be completely their application. So a couple of things that are unique to working with digital currencies as opposed to traditional payments, things that you don't necessarily see that you have to consider before you launch your site. Because what happens is the help desks are the ones that really are impacted the most. Because some of the things that are unique about Bitcoin payments is you can't control, when you create that address, you can't control how much Bitcoin they send. So there's a lot of people I see that try to game the system. They'll go sign up for like a mining contract, and they'll put the invoice out there for $2,000. Then they send 5 cents in Bitcoin and think that they can game the system. So that's going to show up as an underpayment. Okay, so it will show paid at first because we detected that there was a payment at address, but it's going to be sitting in an underpaid status. So it's not going to work. But people will try anything because they like to try to rip sites off. So another thing you'll see is overpayments. We had one person one time send 5 payments of the same amount to the same address. No one knows why. I don't know if he just kept clicking and thinking it wasn't working, but for some reason he made 5 payments. So you have to get that Bitcoin back to that person. So you need to be able to refund Bitcoin back to them. So actually a little interesting side note. Some years ago when I worked in e-commerce, I ran operations for a website that was selling a lot of online goods. We actually would target the drunk shopper. We would send out email promotions on Friday night at 11:30, and we actually found that there was a whole category of people that had been out, maybe at the pub, had a couple drinks, and they loved to shop right then. And boy, they were good. And we had them identified as the people and they would spend a lot of money. It was very, very interesting. So another thing that can happen is, non-payments, double payments, and sometimes people will pay to the wrong address. So some of these things you have to consider operationally, how you're going to handle refunds, how you're going to handle returns, because if you don't, your reputation is going to be damaged. Because one thing in the age we live is it's all about transparency. And if you're not doing the right things, you're going to hear about it on various websites, the reputation sites. They're going to blast you on Reddit. So it's very, very easy to damage your reputation, and it's very easy for somebody who has a bad experience to let the world know. So what strategy should operators take? These are some of the things that I think they ought to be doing. Because if you think about it, Bitcoin ought to be the number one way but websites want to be paid. It's the lowest cost, it's the lowest friction, and there's a lot of advantages to the merchant. So they need to put deals in place. They need to make deals that are special for Bitcoin people. So for example, we have one site that offers a lifetime membership that's only available in Bitcoin. $500 for a lifetime membership, you can't buy it with your credit card. So those are the kinds of things that will motivate people to go buy Bitcoin just to come back to that site and to spend it. Other things they should be doing is bulk purchases, advanced purchase discounts. Rather than recurring payments are very common with credit cards. Well, why not just put a 6-month incentive out there? We're going to give you a discount if you pay with Bitcoin, but you're going to pay for 6 months in advance. That way you don't have to worry about that recurring payment every month that just comes out. And one thing that's very true, one characteristic very true about Bitcoin shoppers, when they spend their Bitcoin, they will spend 2 to 3 times what they ordinarily spend with a credit card or with cash. So the average checkout value that we see on the platform is actually quite a bit higher. The number 5 is, I can't stress this one enough, the number of merchants that come on and are disappointed, and then I talk to them and say, well, what have you done to market? Oh, we posted on Reddit. That's not good enough. It's like working out. Digital marketing is like working out. If you don't drive traffic to your site, no one's going to drive it for you. It doesn't drive itself. You have to continually get out there through SEO, digital marketing campaigns, and different ways to let people know that you're there. Because if you don't do that, it's not build it, they will come. They'll come, but they're going to forget. So you got to stay active, stay relevant, keep on Twitter. Twitter's another really good channel to drive a lot of traffic. And those are the things that work. So incentivizing international purchases. And it's one thing about this region I think it's very interesting is you have a lot of characteristics that are very good for building an ecosystem because you're a pretty tight-knit group in this region. And if you can start to see some of these ecosystems that I'm talking about, I think this is a great, great breeding ground to be sort of a showcase of what Bitcoin can do more in developing nations. Because the developing nations aren't going to happen tomorrow, but those are going to be the big markets that really matter in 10 years. But they're only going to get there if markets that are more developed can show them how this is going to work as an ecosystem. So well, that's all I had for today. I'm happy to open up for questions. Yes?
I have one question. How do you provide liquidity? Let's say the customer wants to buy an expensive card for 100,000 euros. How do you do the back office?
How do we provide liquidity? So we're actually selling the coins on any number of exchanges. We also have big bulk buyers that will buy blocks of coin from us. So that's how we get liquidity, and then we move it down into their bank account ultimately. So and that's one of the things that we have to look at with the altcoins is once a lot of the altcoins are straight pump and dumps. So be careful anytime you see this new coin. It's gaining in value. It's gaining value faster than any. I made 2 million pounds on this coin overnight. Those kind of stories are mostly pump and dump. So, but there are some altcoins that are quite interesting. But if we can't get liquidity, we won't put it on our platform. Litecoin has been very stable. Dogecoin, we've lowered the maximum transaction value down on Dogecoin because I don't want to take a $5,000 Dogecoin order right now because it's still questionable. But I think that Doge still does have a future, and it might be that it just stays the tipping coin. Anybody else?
I have a question. Have you maybe experienced any? Hi, Gregor. Have you maybe experienced any large companies in the world doing global business that they optimize the cash pooling system to the Bitcoin system?
A cash polling system?
Cash pooling, so that they pull together the cash accounts of all companies worldwide, and they just transfer the money between accounts.
Yeah, I have not seen anybody doing that. That would be a little bit out of our wheelhouse. I think there is a company that's working on more B2B commerce, and that's one of the things that we've been saying to a lot of our merchants, especially in developing nations. Try to convince your channels to accept Bitcoin too, and that way, because oftentimes they have suppliers that they need to pay. So if we can pay them in Bitcoin and have them pay their suppliers in Bitcoin, then there's just more Bitcoin that's going out there. The problem right now is typically most merchants are on low margins. We have to sell all of the Bitcoin, give them all cash, and they continue to pay their providers in cash. So as you talk to merchants, as you talk to people in the ecosystem, try to convince everybody as much as possible, take it as their form of payment. Everyone it's stuck in their head that they have to get their money into the bank. Well, they don't. You can hold some coins, and you can find other ways. You take somebody, you go and split a dinner with somebody, don't hand them cash, send them Bitcoin. I try to get everybody I can. Now that the wallets are back on the app stores, there's no reason that everybody shouldn't have the wallet on their phone, and that's the way that we pay each other back when we owe money to each other. In the back.
Hi. So I wanted to ask you how exactly the chargebacks and refunds are done, because in business with credit cards, when you always have the options to do a chargeback with the issuing bank, and here as the issuing bank is not present, how you gain the trust of the customers if the merchant is not okay or something wrong?
That's right, and we've certainly shifted that balance of power. The consumer has too much power right now with credit cards and chargebacks. They are constantly charging back things illegitimately and trying to claw money back from merchants. It happens all the time. It's managing fraud from the merchant perspective. This does move the balance way in the power to the merchant, and it really comes down to reputation. And online reputation can be ruined very, very quickly. So if you have somebody doing something, for example, we had a merchant show up on our site I think they were in Brazil, and they sold something to somebody here in Europe. And it was their very first transaction, and the merchant's like, hey, I didn't get my merchandise. So we shut those down very, very quickly. So yes, there was one transaction that went through. Luckily, it wasn't very big, but that merchant got shut off very quickly. So reputation management online in the day of transparency is really what we have to rely on right now. There are some companies I know also working on escrow services for higher ticket items. So escrow.com and Agreed Escrow are two in particular that will stand in the middle of that transaction and take a little fee. So those are some of the things that are being done to combat that problem.
My question is regarding the legal issue. How do you see developing the legal issue? Let's say the Bitcoin in USA is treated as commodity, in Germany like a private currency, somewhere is non-defined yet. What do you see the trends in the future?
Oh boy, that's a good one. I probably more than anybody on the planet have talked to more regulators and more jurisdictions around the world, getting our arms around the landscape. And most are coming down as a property. That seems to be sort of the common trend. And I think that's the right way to think about it, but it can't be treated like a commodity that's taxed on the transaction, because then it really breaks down. So that's the interesting part about the way that it morphs. It's not a currency, and please, please, I beg people, don't try to convince anyone that it's legal tender in any jurisdiction. We don't want Bitcoin to be treated as legal tender, because legal tender has a lot of ramifications to it with respect to regulation, with respect to legal tender has to be accepted by every merchant. You don't necessarily want that because there's lemonade stands out there that shouldn't take Bitcoin. It's just not in their interest. It's not right for their business model. So it's a very tricky question. I could go on for hours about the legal components, but grab me afterwards. Anybody else? All right, well, I guess we'll wrap it up. Thank you guys very much.